Ford's collapse and Trump's auto tariff shockwave. Was it worth it? For more than 4 years, the whispers had grown louder. And then, in May 2025, they erupted. A 25% tariff on every vehicle not made in the United States. That was the order. If it's built in America, it pays nothing. But if even one component is shipped across a border, it gets taxed, and taxed hard. That's the new rule from Washington. And now, that rule is detonating across the American industrial core. It started as quiet murmurs in Detroit, inside break rooms, on the factory floor. Then it turned into a THUNDERCLAP. Ford Motor Company, the very symbol of American steel. And sweat was reeling. Entire plants were going silent. Workers sent home with no answers. Production lines stalled out mid-shift. And at the epicenter, tariffs. Not from China, not from Europe, but from Washington, D.C. On May 17th, Ford stunned the nation. The company announced it would shut down multiple iconic U.S. plants. The Chicago assembly plant, where Ford Explorers and Lincoln Aviators once rolled off the line by the thousands, fell silent. Michigan assembly, home of the Bronco and Ranger, froze. Thousands of workers were sent home with one instruction: wait for a call. But no one could say when or if that call would come. The reason? Tariffs, but not the kind that protect American jobs. The kind that punish American companies. Donald Trump's latest economic strike, a 25% tariff on all imported cars and parts, was meant to bring jobs back. But instead, it triggered a shockwave that paralyzed U.S. factories and upended global supply chains. Ford said it expected a staggering $1.5 billion hit to earnings this year. The bleeding started immediately, but it didn't stop with Ford. Across the Midwest, the pain spread like wildfire. General Motors scrambled to revise its supply routes, laying off hundreds while quietly moving truck production back to Indiana. Stellantis, the parent company of Chrysler and Dodge, idled major plants in Canada and Mexico. But the shockwave didn't stop at the border. It boomeranged right back into America's heartland. In Michigan and Indiana alone, nearly 900 parts workers were laid off in a matter of days. Ford fought back the only way it could: price hikes. Vehicles like the Mustang Mach-E, Maverick, and Bronco Sport, all built in Mexico, saw sticker prices rise by nearly $2,000. For customers, it was a shock. For dealerships, it was chaos. For Ford, it still wasn't enough. Behind the scenes, executives were panicking. The price of steel, aluminum, electronics, everything was surging. The Lincoln Nautilus, imported from China, had become too expensive to keep on showroom floors. Ford halted exports to China entirely, losing access to one of the largest auto markets on earth. The damage was clear. This wasn't just policy. This was economic war, and it had come home. Reporters pressed the president about Ford's factory shutdowns. His response? Expected. Then he doubled down. They should have brought production back a long time ago. These tariffs are about America first. That statement sent a chill through every auto executive in America. If the president could shrug off Ford's collapse, who was safe? Now the real storm was brewing. Stellantis shuttered SUV production in Mexico for an entire month. That meant no parts, no assembly, no movement. And soon, it meant no paychecks. U.S. stamping plants tied to those Mexican-built vehicles went dark. Layoffs followed. Tension boiled over. Morale crumbled. In an extraordinary move, the auto unions turned on management. The pressure wasn't just economic, it was existential. In Fort Wayne, GM tried to make a stand. It added shifts, hired 200 workers, restarted paused production. Trucks like the Silverado and Sierra had to be built in the U.S. to avoid the tariff blowback. And for a moment, it worked. But under the surface, executives warned, this isn't sustainable. If supply chains don't adapt, even the most loyal factories may fall. Meanwhile, companies like Nissan began canceling U.S. orders for Mexico-built SUVs. Toyota and Honda slowed shipments. Prices began to rise, not just by a few bucks. In April, the average new car price jumped 2.6%, the sharpest spike in years. Dealers warned buyers, buy now or pay more later. But there was a bigger problem. There were fewer cars to buy. Inventory was drying up. Deliveries were stalled. And the showroom lots that once overflowed were now half-empty. Ford slashed prices in a desperate move. Employee pricing for all. That kind of discount is typically reserved for recessions. This time, it was about survival. But even that gamble wasn't enough. The math no longer worked. Auto parts from Mexico, 25% more expensive. Vehicles from Canada, taxed at the border. Electronics and batteries from China, up to 30% more costly. The entire North American supply chain, built over decades, was now breaking apart. Ford CEO Jim Farley called it the fairest fight in decades. He meant it as a show of strength. But behind closed doors, Ford was slashing forecasts, cutting guidance, and warning shareholders that even with 80% of its vehicles built in the U.S., the company was still losing. And then came the layoffs. Cities, like Toledo and Kokomo, once spared during past downturns, were finally hit. Assembly lines were shut down. Whole shifts erased. The small towns that depended on those jobs, the diners, gas stations, grocery stores, were now bracing for the worst. In Indiana, labor boards issued unemployment alerts. In Michigan, mayors called for emergency federal support. But Washington held firm. The tariffs would stay. Wall Street reacted quickly. Auto stocks fell. Supplier shares collapsed. Analysts warned, if these tariffs continue, the U.S. auto industry could lose over 1 million car sales this year alone. Still, there was no pivot from Washington, no rollback, no compromise, just one message. This is the price of bringing manufacturing home. Inside the industry, companies weren't waiting for help. They were preparing for battle. GM reassigned engineers. Stellantis froze hiring. Ford shelved upcoming launches. And across every boardroom, the same question echoed. Is this what America First looks like? Because what's being lost isn't just profit, it's momentum. North America's auto ecosystem was once a marvel of integration. 3 nations, thousands of suppliers, millions of workers, decades of collaboration. Now, that system is unraveling. Ford cannot just move its factories overnight. Neither can GM. These supply chains were built for speed, cost, and scale. Breaking them is not just expensive, it's dangerous. And yet, that's what companies are now. Being forced to do shift production here, cancel contracts there, pause shipments, raise prices, cut jobs. And hope. The American worker is the one left behind. For every